Working at Verint, I help with our engagement management solutions in finding the best ways to do that.
Well, pleasure to have your expertise, Kelly. I know you've got a lot of insights you're looking forward to sharing with today's audience and group, and pleasure to have you. Kate, are you in San Francisco?
I'm in the San Francisco Bay Area, yes.
Well, pleasure to have you. Hope you're having some better weather than Kelly is in Phoenix. But Kate, you're a well-known industry expert out there. It's an absolute pleasure to have some of your time. Could you tell our audience that may not be familiar with you a little bit more about your role and background?
Sure. Thanks, Chad. I'm happy to be here. I work at Forrester Research. I head up the CRM practice. CRM encompasses a tremendous amount of technology, and I have a deep focus in customer service technologies as well as sales automation technologies. And what I'm particularly interested in is the move of customer engagement to the digital and self-service channels, and how companies are adopting digital and self-service channels to provide experiences in line with customer expectations to be able to keep their customers satisfied and loyal to their brand.
Well, your expertise is going to be fantastic, and let's go ahead and jump in. And I guess, Kate, we'll start with you. We kind of teed up the webinar about the tipping point between digital self-service versus when to humanize interaction. So I know you've got a lot of insight and data, so let's get started. Again, for our attendees, as we're going through today's webinar, if you do have questions, please use the platform. There are a question area in the platform to ask your questions, and also a chat, and I'll make sure I get those asked to our two esteemed panelists for today. Again, you're listening to Forrester and Verint on the webinar, the Digital Tipping Point. So, Kate, let's jump right in.
Okay, thank you, Chad. To talk about why the digital channels are so important and understand this digital tipping point, you really have to take a step back and talk about the expectations of the modern customer as they engage with companies that they do business with. So you think back a decade ago, a couple decades ago, companies that you did business with, companies did a great job at controlling all the information about products and services. For example, their price, locations, features and functions, issues, how to solve those issues, how products were best used, best installed, best where customers were best onboarded to deliver the business value to the company using these products. So what happened a decade ago, or a good decade ago, was that social media and the internet matured to such a point that it ushered in what Forrester calls the age of the customer. And today there is a tremendous amount of transparency and authenticity about the information relevant to products and services that you have purchased. Product specifications, case studies, how the product or service is rated, is reviewed, issues surrounding the product, how to solve those issues. So what it means is today that customers are sitting in the driver's seat and they are controlling the conversation that they are having with the companies that they do business with. And what this means is that companies have to do a better job at delivering engagement or customer experiences in line with customer expectations to be able to garner their satisfaction and their long-term loyalty. And this isn't only true in the B2C world, but it's increasingly true in the B2B world. So again, companies have to be obsessed with customers' expectations for engagement. And why is this so important? It's because good customer experiences are good for business. Good customer experiences have a quantifiable revenue impact. A happy customer correlates to a loyal customer. And a loyal customer is one who is more likely to keep their business with that company. A loyal customer is one who will look to buy additional products from a company, whether it's a cross-sell, an upsell, a whole new other product. And a loyal customer is one who will serve as an advocate and will recommend the company, the products of the company to others in their network. And what we find is that there is a correlation between customer satisfaction and increased top-line revenue in over 40 industries that we have data on, as measured by increased retention, increased purchases or increased enrichment, customer lifetime value, and increased advocacy. Okay, so what are your customers' expectations for engagement? First of all, customers expect easy interactions. They want to be able to reach into a company over the touch point, over the channel of their choice, get the answer to their question, and get on with their busy lives. They want that interaction to be effective, for it to fully resolve their question or fully resolve their issue, fully answer their question without having to recontact the customer. And they also want to feel good about that interaction. They want to walk away thinking that the company understands who they are, and they have contextualized, personalized the answer, the interaction to their particular situation. And this is what we call the 3 E's of customer experience. Customer experiences have to be easy, effective, and have to elicit a positive emotion. So where does customer service fit in? Customer service is a cornerstone to a company's customer experience strategy. Over 2/3 of interactions that customers have with a company are either for pre-purchase support or post-purchase support. And so for customer service, you can say that customers also expect easy, effective experiences or customer service experiences that elicit a positive emotion. So delving into these 3 E's just a little bit more, let's start with easy engagement. And today we know that customers, they don't want to be delighted by service. They don't expect these Disney-esque interactions. And you think of everyone who's on this webinar today. You're all really busy. If you have an issue to resolve, if you have a question that you need an answer, again, you want to reach into a company over the touchpoint channel of your choice, easily, effortlessly connect with either a customer service organization via either self-service or an agent interaction to get your answer to your question or your issue resolved. And our data at Forrester backs up the statement that customers are really expecting easy engagement. 53% of customers will abandon their online purchase if they can't find a quick answer to their question. 73% of you say that valuing their time is the most important way for a company to provide good service. And these 2 metrics have been trending upwards for the last 3 years. And just another point is that we see this impatience, this need for companies to value a customer's time, both in the younger generation as well as the older generation. So,
Kate, if I could just got it, just real quick. A lot of people are joining, and you're listening to Kate Leggett, VP and Principal Analyst from Forrester, going through all of the insights and research. So sorry, Kate, just we had some people asking, so I wanted to jump in and just remind.
That you are seeing here is Forrester data, and the source of this data is this is our North American data. we run this customer life cycle survey that's referenced at the bottom of the screen, and it's a compilation of over close to 4,500 data points. So at Forrester, we've been measuring the channels that customers use for service for the last 5 years. And for the first time ever, we found that customers want to self-serve instead of picking up the phone and calling a service rep as the first point of contact. In our latest survey, we saw that 84% of consumers said that they are using help or FAQ on the company's website or a mobile website. And this is a data point that's more than the phone or email or chat or Twitter. And why these numbers don't all add up to 100% is it's because the way the question is phrased. We ask, what are all the channels that you have used for customer service in the last 3 months, and you are able to pick up the channels that you've used. So what's interesting is you look at all the self-service channels, help or FAQ on a company's website or mobile website, voice self-service, communities, virtual agents. These are all forms of self-service. You add them up, and they far exceed the interactions that customers are having over the phone. And it's because self-service interactions offer an easy and effortless way to be able to get the answer to your question. And what we find is the phone channel is still very important, but it's increasingly being used as an escalation point for the harder questions. And what this means is that you may want to look at the types of questions phone agents are getting within your company. And they may be getting those questions that can't be easily answered via self-service, or they're too complex. And this phone channel is, again, being used for the harder questions that may take longer to resolve. And it also means that in this world of digital relationships, these phone interactions are rare moments where you can engage with a customer, and it's a great opportunity to help build and strengthen and nurture the relationship that you have with your customers. So we know that customers go to self-service sites as a first point of contact to be able to find that answer to their question or get an issue resolved. And they are doing this, again, because the self-service channels, if they're done right, do a great job at being able to provide that effortless, that easy experience that keeps customers satisfied and loyal. And so understanding the importance of self-service is it's very important, and companies really need to look at the foundations of their knowledge management programs. And knowledge management, it could be curated content, it could also be supplemented by peer-generated content. And you really have to look at strengthening the foundations of your knowledge program to make sure that you are delivering the answers to the questions that your customers are asking you about. You want to make sure that content is easily found, that it is contextualized, and you also want to ensure that the same knowledge is available across all channels, so that your customers are able to get consistent answers to their questions. And what we find when customers are not able to find the answers to their questions easily via self-service, and they need to escalate, what we're finding is that they don't want to be navigating an arduous IVR or have to enter and re-enter information that they've already communicated to the company. They don't want to get transferred around the company from one agent pool to another. Again, the customers are expecting these easy, effective experiences, and again, they want to reach into a company, get connected to the right resource, get their question answered, and what we find is that more and more customers are turning to the low-friction channels like chat and messaging because they're valuing customers' time. So when you think about digital channels, you have to think about starting with self-service, or your customers are starting with self-service because it provides an easy, effective experience. And then when they can't find what they're looking for, you want to make sure that they're able to, as frictionlessly as possible, reach into the company and connect with the right resource. And what we find at Forrester is, again, more and more customers are turning to the low-friction digital channels to do so. Okay, with that, Kelly, do you want to introduce us to the Q&A section?
Yeah, thanks, Kate. You know, I think we've all experienced this transformation into the age of the customer and how these digital channels have really changed the way contact centers work. So I want to dive in. I have a few questions that we can both talk about to kind of follow up on everything that you've already mentioned. So we'll talk about this tipping point of when contacts go to the digital channels and when you still require that personal touch. And then, as I mentioned, we'll talk about the impact this has on the contact center, because you can't just keep operating as business as usual because things have changed. And then we'll get into knowledge management, as you talked about. It's a really important and valuable tool in this new age of the customer. So we'll talk about the importance of knowledge and how to get started, and then we'll wrap up with some best practices and tips on how to optimize knowledge. So let's go ahead and dive into the first question. So in your opinion, Kate, and I might chime in when you're done, what is this tipping point? We see a bunch of interactions going to digital, but there's still millions and millions of calls on the phone every day as well. So what is the tipping point that causes an interaction to move from self-service to assisted service?
That's a really good question. And I think of this in the framework of the 3 E's that I presented up front in this webinar. Customers expect easy experiences. They expect effective experiences. That means getting the full answer to your question without a recontact, or the full issue resolved. And they also want to feel good about the interaction. And I think when interactions move from self-service to an agent-assisted interaction is when one of the 3 E's fails. So what does that mean? So when self-service isn't easy, then customers will move to assisted service. When knowledge management isn't easy, or when self-service isn't easy, it means that your customers can't easily find the answer to their question, or the answer is too convoluted, or can't be found in a search results that may be 200 search results large, and they have to wade through many solutions to find that nugget to answer their question. Customers move to assisted service when the answer that they're finding isn't effective, when the content doesn't effectively answer their question, when the content it's not clearly written, it's not written in a way that's easily understandable. If you have a very complex issue and you can't fully answer a customer's question. I also think that self-service moves to assisted service when the self-service interaction doesn't elicit a positive emotion, when the user experience is poor, when the UI isn't intuitive, where your customers are trying to struggle with your self-service tools, and the content may be there, the content may be effective at resolving your issue or answering your question, but the whole user experience is hard, and it's eliciting that negative emotion that makes your customer pick up the phone or chat with an agent. Anyway, that's the way I think about when self-service moves to assisted service. What do you think?
Yeah, I think that's a really it's a really good way to think about it. You know, it's always nice when you can. It's an easy to remember set of things. So easy, effective, and emotion. So that's really what you should strive for. And I think you know, as an organization, you can do your best job with your user experience and with your content to try to drive as much of those interactions to self-service as possible. But I think it's important also that organizations understand that there will always be certain interactions that cannot achieve those 3 E's with self-service. You know, if it's an issue that is highly sensitive and the person really needs a bit more hand-holding and that personal touch to achieve that positive emotion, they can't be done, you know, by a computer. You know, so there will always be certain interactions that tipping point just is always going to lean towards assisted. So you can't totally forget that channel, but you can do as much as you can to hit those 3 E's via self-service. I think another important thing that's really come up with that is digital assisted. So assisted service is not always the phone. You know, now it could be live chat, it could be Facebook Messenger. So all of these new digital assisted channels are popping up that help that transition become a little bit easier so that it's not so jarring to completely leave your self-service experience and have to go pick up your phone and start all over again.
And that is really important to try to ensure that your customers' expectations for service are met. What you have to focus on is making that transition from self-service to assisted service as seamless as possible, where the context of your inquiry, everything that you've communicated online has to be passed to the agent when you're escalating so that the customer doesn't have to restart the conversation, so that the agent can pick up exactly where the customer left off on the self-service site to streamline the interaction, but as well to elicit that positive emotion of, yeah, I understand you've already looked at these different solutions or you've tried to research the answer to your question, and let's figure out what else I can do to provide you, to guide you, to help you along in your journey of finding the answer or resolving your question.
So Kate and Kelly, hi Chad, we have a very active audience. There's some terrific questions coming in, and I don't know if we want to pause and field a few of them or we want to wait towards the end, but I want to make sure that our listeners are aware that I am seeing the questions and appreciate the participation. So Kelly, Kate, you want to take a few now or you want to keep going?
Why don't we run through, because we may answer some of them as we continue in the rest of these questions, but we will definitely make sure we leave time. I'm so glad that you guys are engaged in asking questions. Please keep doing so, and we'll get to as many as we can live on the webinar, and hopefully we will answer some as we go through. And then you can just start teeing them up for us, Chad, once we run through these 5.
Perfect. Okay. Thank you.
Great. So let's move on, Kate, to the second question. So obviously things are now changing and we can't continue operating business as usual. So what impacts have you seen with this digital tipping point on the contact center?
So I've got another little pithy phrase that I use to talk about the impact of this digital tipping point on the contact center. I say contact centers are getting smaller, they're getting smarter, and they're getting more strategic. So what does that mean? Contact centers are getting smaller. You'd think that most of the volume of questions that come into a contact center tend to be questions that can be answered fairly easily via self-service. And if you do knowledge management well, all the easy questions or even the straightforward questions are going to get answered via customer-facing knowledge management, and then you can think of knowledge management being supplemented by discussion forums or having a virtual agent overlay. But those easier questions are going to get answered via customer-facing self-service. And so what it means is that contact centers will get smaller because the harder questions, the more complex questions, are getting into your contact center. So contact centers are also going to get smarter. And again, this is because your complex questions are getting into the contact center. They may take longer to resolve, and you may need to upskill your agents to be able to answer those questions. So that's what I mean by contact centers get smaller, contact centers get smarter. Contact centers are also going to get more strategic. And what I mean by this is if you're doing self-service really well, it's really the exceptions, the really hard questions that are making it into the contact center. They're the longer questions, the more complex questions. So these questions that take an agent's time, these are rare moments where if you answer those questions well, you're providing real value to your customers. It's a time where you're interacting with your customers, and in the world of digital interactions and self-service interactions that we live in, these live agent interactions are less frequent. So they're rare moments where you can, again, nurture, you can build on the relationship that you have established with your customers. And again, if you're able to answer those more complicated questions really well, your customers are walking away from that interaction feeling good about it. And it's making your contact center more strategic. So anyway, that's my point of view, Kelly.
Yeah, I totally agree. You know, we're pretty much everybody here on the phone is in some way in the customer service industry, and so we've all heard those stories about those magic moments where you know, a company really just wows a customer. And if you think about those moments, almost all of them started with something going wrong. They started as a service issue, and so you know, you're totally right. Now that we have these opportunities to engage live with the customer are more and more rare, we should take them as opportunities because, yes, something did go wrong. They had some problem that caused them to have to call, but you can really take that opportunity to turn it around and build engagement with that customer and make them think more highly of the company by the time they're off the phone. So really is a good opportunity. I've also seen that the metrics that you use in your contact center are likely to change. Since these are such challenging calls and since you are trying to build this relationship with your customer, things like average handle time are going to be less and less important, you know, because these aren't going to be quick one and done types of calls. So that'll change. Your training will change. There's so much information, you can't just train it all. You're going to have to rely on things like knowledge management to help these agents, even though they're more skilled. They're going to have to rely on knowledge because they're simply not going to know every answer. It's too much, and the issues are too complex. So the training regime will change as well. I think all good points, Kate. Why don't we go to the third question? So let's move in now a little bit more to knowledge management. So we've talked about how knowledge management is important in this new age. Do you think knowledge management is more important in self-service or in the contact center, or maybe both?
Well, from this discussion, you may walk away thinking that knowledge management is more important for self-service because we're talking about the digital tipping point. But actually, knowledge management is equally important. It's important for customer self-service. It's also important to arm agents with standardized answers within the contact center. So for self-service knowledge, first of all, it helps deflect incoming contacts. It also helps customers get answers quickly, which boosts customer satisfaction. And then if you do knowledge management really, really well, your customers are going to come back to your knowledge site for best practices, for tips, for not only answers to questions or resolutions to issues. And customers' knowledge can also help improve engagement, which ultimately has an impact on keeping your customers satisfied with your products and services, so that they're less likely to take their business to another company. So it also increases engagement and helps decrease customer churn. But then if you look at knowledge for customer service agents within the contact center, what you're doing is you're arming your agents with this corpus of answers, and it's increasing their productivity. They can give customers that they're interacting with full answers to their questions, relevant answers. It also helps make sure that all your agents are compliant to company policy or regulatory policy, because again, knowledge, if you're doing it right, it's a corpus of standardized answers, which makes sure that all the answers across all channels are the same. So I think knowledge management is equally important for self-service as well as for agents within the contact center.
Yeah, I totally agree. You know, knowledge management has evolved quite a bit over the years beyond just, you know, a static list of FAQs that you might have had on a self-service site. You know, a lot more is required of it. So if knowledge management is executed properly, and then in the next couple questions we'll get into what does that mean, how do you do it right. We'll give you guys some best practices. But yeah, it has a tremendous impact on both, and really when it has its best impact is when a single knowledge management system is used across those channels. So, you know, it's not one or the other. They work together, and they get even better as they work together, because then you can do things like have knowledge in your contact center for some of these more complex issues, and as those issues get really optimized and honed, you can move those knowledge articles out to self-service and start to push some of those resolutions to self-service. So they really work together to help along all of the channels. So let's start to talk a bit about the nuts and bolts. I want to make sure people on the phone get some real tangible help on how to get started and how to really perform well with knowledge. So what are some of your tips that you would give on getting started with knowledge management?
Oh, this is a really hard question. So first of all, getting started doesn't mean doing a Google search and finding all the vendors that sell knowledge bases and going and buying a knowledge base. It doesn't start with technology. It's all about getting your strategy right, getting your processes right, getting your people factors right, and then choosing the technology to support your strategy, your processes. So the way that I think about getting started is, first of all, you have to figure out who is going to own the knowledge management program. Who's going to be your executive sponsor? Who holds your budget for this project? Who is on the hook to make a long-term resource commitment? Because, again, knowledge management is not a single piece of technology that you install and you walk away from. I always think that knowledge management is this living, breathing thing that is only good enough as long as you're caring for it daily, and you're making sure that your knowledge is in line with customer expectations. As soon as you walk away from the upkeep of your knowledge base will get stale and will not provide you with the value that you need it to provide again good customer experiences. So start with who owns the knowledge program, who has the budget. Create a project team, a project manager who is responsible for coordinating your knowledge project, your rollout activities. How are you going to create a content? You need knowledge authors. You need input from contact center agents. You need perhaps product experts. You may need legal to review knowledge content. You need folks from your IT department who's responsible for the maintenance of the piece of technology, your knowledge-based technology, then you need to think about processes. What knowledge programs will you follow? How are you going to create content? Who's going to be responsible to create content? How are you going to update content? How are you going to publish new content to your knowledge base? If this is a new knowledge implementation, how are you going to roll out your knowledge base? How are you going to tell your customers about your knowledge initiative? How are you going to socialize your knowledge base within your contact center, for example, to make sure that your agents are using it? And then lastly, what are your success metrics? If this is a new knowledge program, how are you going to measure your success? What are you going to report to your executive to say, we invested in this technology and we're able to get this quantifiable business value out of it? So I think about starting a knowledge base. It's about your putting the team in place, finding that executive sponsor, looking at your knowledge processes that you'll support, success metrics, and then there's a whole framework, a level down about when you start creating content for your knowledge base, defining content standards and information architecture, trying to figure out what sources of knowledge you're going to draw from, and then all the lower level workflows to keep a knowledge content being created and moving through the publication process. So let me stop there, Kelly. I can talk about this forever, but it's not about buying technology at first.
Yeah, really good points. I have very little to add because that's already so much good advice. I think, I totally agree with you that yes, you will in the end buy a piece of technology. That will be a step in the process, but a lot of people really focus on that part, and it's really so much more than that. You need to get buy-in from the executives on down, because if they're not in favor of it and they're not promoting it and they're not changing the culture, because it is a cultural change, if that's not coming from the executives on down, you're going to end up with an adoption problem. You're going to spend all this time and effort and money in the system and nobody will use it. So you really need to set that set that from the execs on down to have the new culture. I think it's also important as you get started, you mentioned figuring out your metrics and what do you want to measure. Another step that people sometimes forget when they're getting started is to set a baseline. So we need to understand where are we now so that we know where we want to be and if we're successful. So you have to set that baseline. And then it's important to understand where you are now in terms of you're trying to solve the problem of getting people the right information. So what information are people looking for? You need to start to do some analysis of what are people looking for now and how are they trying to get to it? What channels are they looking on? What kinds of questions are they asking? How are they asking those questions? So doing a lot of baseline work is important to make sure you know where you are now and where you want to get to. And somewhere in the middle there you will buy technology, but that's just one small step. Okay, so we've got one more question. I want to make sure we're leaving plenty of time at the end for questions from the group. So our last question is around tips to optimize your knowledge for the best results. And you hit on a couple of these things, but I think there's some more tips we can give these folks on the line to really make sure that they're getting the most out of their knowledge management system.
Yeah, so optimizing knowledge is incredibly important because, again, if you're not doing a good job at keeping content in line with customer expectations, where content isn't able to be easily found, if it doesn't effectively answer customer questions, your customers and your agents will stop using your knowledge base. So you have to do a really good job at making sure that your knowledge, and I use content and knowledge interchangeably, but your knowledge is in line with your customers' expectations. So first of all, on a regular basis, whether it's daily or weekly or once every 2 weeks, pull reports. understand what content is the most used, what content is not used at all. With content that's not used at all, you should get rid of it. Ask why it's in your knowledge base. It's just cluttering your search results. Content that is the most used, you want to figure out if the content is displayed and is written in the best format. You want to review well-used content, again, to make sure that it is as perfect as possible. You want to understand your customers' words. If they're typing in search terms that are yielding no results, where are your content gaps? Figure out what they are and fill them. You also want to give your customers and your agents, basically everybody who comes in contact with content, the opportunity to rate it, to review it, to say, did this content help answer your questions, to be able to suggest modifications on content and take that input. You may not get it very frequently, but take that input and review and use it to optimize content. You also may want to give agents, perhaps they're your super agents, authoring rights to be able to even modify content if it makes sense in your company, to be able to modify content almost in real time if they find issues with content. So those are just a couple ways of that I think of how content or knowledge should be optimized. Kelly, I'm sure you got more tips.
Yeah, we have tons of information on this because again, if you're not doing it right, it's not going to be valuable, and like you said, people won't use it. Some tips on the articles themselves. I do see a bit of a difference between knowledge and content, because content can kind of be anything. Knowledge articles, to be the most valuable, should really be optimized for answering a single specific type of question or issue. So they should be short. They shouldn't be something that you're scrolling and reading pages and pages. It should be as concise as possible and limited to a single, very specific topic. And more so than that, it shouldn't be, as much as possible, just written as, prose, long paragraphs. Whenever you can, you should break into bullets, tables, images, video. And the reason for this is that you can picture the scenario in which this knowledge is being used. This is either a customer who has an issue in the middle of their life, they're busy doing other things, or this is a contact center agent on the phone live talking to a customer. You need to really get to the point as quickly as possible and make it as readable as quickly as possible. I'm sure we've all tried in our daily lives for one reason or another to read something while talking to somebody. It's not the easiest thing to do. So you really need to make it as easy as possible for both your customers and your contact center agents to get the information and digest it as easily as possible. You also want to title the knowledge articles to be about the problem, not about the solution. Because if you think about, let's say my printer is printing things that are blurry. And the issue with that is maybe that some string on my printer is loose. I don't know that the string on my printer is loose. If I knew that, I would go fix it. All I know is that my text is blurry on my printer. So you want to title your knowledge article about resolving blurry text on the printer, not about tightening some string inside the printer. So all your titles should be based on the problem, because if you think about it, that's what they type in the search box. They type their problem. So always focus on problem-based titles. And the last thing I would say is to get some usability people involved. Actually do some live studies of the number of clicks it takes to get to things and how people are using the system to make sure it's optimized for real users. If you only have knowledge people looking at it, they may not think about things from a usability point of view. So get some UI experts and some usability folks in there to look at your system to make sure it's really optimized and maximized for usability, again, both for customers and for agents. So I've left this. Oh, and you have something to add there, Kate?
I was going to say, no, those are absolute great points. And as well, focus on things like content standards, so like your content is all written in the same way. and use your
Absolutely.
customer's language as well,
Absolutely.
and not technical terms.
Yep,
Anyway.
yep, good point. So we've left about 10 minutes for some questions live from the group, as well as just some wrap-up I know that Chad wants to let you guys know about. So Chad, at this point, I will hand it back to you, and you can start to shoot some questions at us.
No, fantastic and outstanding presentation, Kelly and Kate. Thank you so much for that insight. And we're going to jump into a number of questions that the community has been asking, so thank you. These are in any random order, so I've not necessarily bucketized them for you and all, but the first question was, if I support multiple languages, do I need to translate my knowledge management solution, or can I use an integrated real-time translation tool? Kelly, Kate, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, what I would always recommend is to have localized versions of the articles, and many knowledge management systems, ours included, support this, where you have a single knowledge article, a single sort of object, if you will, and then it has different locales that you can store the different localized versions for it. And the reason I would say that rather than the real-time is that the real-time stuff just hasn't quite gotten up to par yet to be perfectly understandable. And if you think back to the last question I was answering around having these knowledge articles be as easy to consume as possible, you don't want that person on that contact center agent on the phone or that customer struggling to understand what they really mean because it's not translated well by a real-time engine.
Yeah, the other thing is that you may have different content and different policies, perhaps, in different regions of the world with different languages. So not only translating content is a good idea, but as well look at the language-specific content needs and perhaps add those to your localized knowledge base.
Yeah, good
Okay,
point.
well, perfect. And Tom, thank you for the question. Renee asked, how does speech analytics help with knowledge management? How can speech analytics help with knowledge management? Any thoughts?
Yes, good. Thank you for seating me whoever that was with a great question. So some of the things we can do, as you know, Verint has tools like speech analytics as well. So one of the really great opportunities we found, something that knowledge management users have struggled with for years, is to find knowledge gaps. What is it people can't find? What's not in the knowledge base? And speech analytics gives us a great way to find that. You basically mine your speech analytics for the times when your agents are saying, hold on, I'm trying to find that for you, let me see it, and those kinds of keywords where you know that they're not finding the answer in the knowledge base. So speech analytics has been fantastic for that reason. And then likewise, you can also, measure your different topics and your sentiments, so you can see then what types of calls are not being successful grouped by topic and category, and that's another way to look at how your knowledge is performing.
Yeah, and you can
perfect.
also, with speech analytics, understand how your customers are asking the question, because they're not saying, I have code 1529 that's showing up on my printer. They may say, well, my printer has just stopped working, or it's bunching up paper. So being able to understand the customer's words that they're using to describe the problem can be extracted from speech analytics, as well as text analytics if those questions are coming in via chat, for example.
Perfect. And Jill, just the deck will be mailed out post-webinar. Everyone will get a copy of today's recording in session. It'll probably hit your email tomorrow. You'll get a copy of that. Switching gears just a little bit, going to virtual assistants, there's been a few questions around that, away from the knowledge management. Mark had asked, what is the role of the virtual assistant chatbot?
Yeah, virtual
Any thoughts
assistants.
there?
Yeah, virtual assistants have really made a resurgence. They've been around for a long time, but suddenly they're becoming much more popular again. And they have a really good role because they give you that sense of conversation, but it can be done in an automated fashion, but can be escalated to a real person. That bot can turn into a real person by transferring that conversation when needed. So it helps with that tipping point, making it seamless, like Kate was talking about. And the knowledge fits in basically as fodder for some of the information the virtual assistant will point you to. Not all of it is knowledge, because again, some of it is more of that conversational stuff, but the virtual assistant can be configured to point to the knowledge articles to say, hey, have you read this? Have you looked at this? And walk you through the answers to your question.
Yeah, I always see knowledge, virtual agents or systems as a layer on top of knowledge management. So they're helping point and guide you to the right knowledge within your knowledge base. But it could also be hooked up to transactional systems where you tell the virtual assistant, can you book me on the next flight out from San Francisco to Boston? And it's able to transact for you. So it has capabilities above and beyond what a knowledge base is used for. And they're true powers when they're used together.
And this other question is sort of aligned when we think of the virtual assistant. It says, any sense of what % of contact centers are using chatbots or virtual chat assistants today? Any ideas around that? Rough guess.
I don't know, Kate, if you have numbers, but I know that it varies a lot, both by industry and by region. So I don't know if, Kate, if you have numbers, but there's certain types of business that it works better for than others.
Yeah, and I was going to say exactly that. You see it quite often in airlines and some retail where conversations are constrained and the corpus of conversations is well known. If conversations if that corpus of conversations can't be corralled as easily, they don't work as well, and so you see them again in airlines and travel, some retail, some financial services institutions, but the percentage is still quite small. Virtual assistants take, again, a lot of care and feeding, even more so than knowledge management solutions, and to be able to get them to perform well. So a lot of companies have implemented them, not been able to get true value out of them, and have taken them out. And it's mainly because they haven't put the overhead in place to be able to maintain maintain your virtual assistants and optimize conversations. But it's still a very small percentage.
So I got a couple quick ones I'll throw out here, and thank you again. This is talking about some of the gamification strategies that help ease the transition to self-service by engaging communities or the folks involved in that. And the question is, do you see a possibility for customers to eventually collect tangible rewards, i.e. money to self-serve or something, in, maybe not money, but something in those regards? Do you have any thoughts around that question?
Gamification does have a lot of benefits, both for self-service as well as encouraging adoption of the contact center agents. So I do recommend using gamification. The rewards can often be something that's not tangible, just badges and things. A lot of people in communities for self-service and forums, they just like to be known as the expert. They like the recognition. So I think people are hopefully getting enough value from the systems that you're not going to need to reward them financially, but little tokens here and there. Here's a coupon. Here's a discount. Those sure, I'm sure they would be effective as well. But I think the recognition is the most important part.
Yeah, especially for agent knowledge, and it helps drive an agent group to take collective responsibility for the health of the knowledge base. And that's one of the reasons why we see quite a bit of gamification and agent-facing knowledge, where you have leaderboards and kudos of agents who have rated the most content or submitted the most usable content, and it drives, again, the group taking full responsibility, collective responsibility of the knowledge base, and it up-levels the amount of and the level of content or knowledge that you have in a knowledge base. So, like Kelly said, we see gamification pretty pervasively in contact centers around knowledge programs.
I'll throw one last quick question. Is there a best knowledge management tool out there, or any recommendations anyone have comments on?
Well, I would have to say Verint Knowledge Management is going to be by far. No, you really should. You're going to need to look at your needs. There's a lot of good vendors out there, and I think talking to people like Forrester and Kate are going to help understand matching your needs to the right product. I don't know if Kate, you want to add to that.
Yeah, I was going to say if you have complex knowledge needs where you have an exhaustive amount of content that you need localized in many different languages, there's a subset of vendors that offer those capabilities. If you have very straightforward needs, looking for companies that offer straightforward knowledge management capabilities is the way to go. There is not one vendor that is the best. I always say it's like buying a car. You're not going to buy a two-seater Corvette if you have 4 kids. So it's understanding your needs and finding the vendor who best matches your needs, and as well who is best able to integrate into the ecosystem of tools that your contact center is using.
Well, and if we could go to the next slide, Kate, and I want to seriously thank all of our listeners today. You've been great participants, and I know we did not get to all the questions that were made available from the audience today, and my commitment is we'll follow up with these questions and get back to you. Kate and Kelly, again, fantastic. Cannot thank you both enough for the subject matter expertise and insights shared today. And I really hope, Kate and Kelly, that you'll join us in Austin on September 18th and 20th. It's our next leadership gathering. Love to invite all of our listeners today. It's the Customer Response Summit. It's our 2-day summit of leading brands sharing best practices around multi-channel customer engagement, and there's many details you can find about that at execsintheknow.com. And then on the final slide there, again, as for the customer management executive professional, we are here with lots of data and insights that you can find, research data and other information on execsintheknow.com. So on behalf of that, I would like to personally thank our audience and thank our panelists. You will all receive a link tomorrow with the recording and a post-event webinar survey from today. I would appreciate your feedback as you're my customers, and I need to hear your voice and thoughts and comments. Everyone have a fantastic day. Thank you again for joining today's webinar. This will now conclude the session. Thank you.